All right, Madam Clerk, number 13. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great night.
All reports and all presentations from members of City Council.
Okay, Councilman Pike, you want to go with the first one? Councilman Pike.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to members of the council for allowing me to bring this before us tonight. As was on the docket and you all received earlier from me, I'm bringing forward a resolution which commits Alexandria to protecting the constitutional rights of LGBTQ plus people in our city, people visiting our city. For years, there's been so much progress on LGBTQ equality in this country. And in Virginia, in 2020, our own state senator, Adam Ebbin, passed the Virginia Values Act, which enshrines civil rights protections for Virginia LGBTQ people into our state's laws. We're still trying to do that at the federal level with the Equality Act, which has passed the House twice, but has not yet passed the United States Senate. My boss in Congress is actually the sponsor of the Equality Act now, and we're gonna work very hard if we get the Congress back in the presidency next year to pass that bill. In 2021, the Congress did pass the Respect for Marriage Act, which protects same-sex marriages from a potential court action that could undermine the Obergefell decision. But progress invites backlash, and that backlash has arrived. Across the country, in the last 2 years, more than 500 anti-LGBTQ plus bills have been filed in state legislatures. That's the most ever, the largest storm of anti-gay, anti-trans legislation America has ever seen. And a large percentage of these bills target trans Americans specifically. Many of them even target young people more specifically. Scared students trying to understand who they are and how they fit into this world deserve our support and our understanding. Instead, too many of them are being asked to bear the full weight of their community's fear and anger towards people whose lives are just a little different. That is too much weight to put on the shoulders of such young and vulnerable students. These are children we should be protecting, not persecuting. 84 of these bills have actually passed into law over the last 2 years. 12 anti-LGBTQ bills were filed in the Virginia General Assembly last year, plus 11 more this year. But thankfully, none of them were passed into law. Project 2025, the blueprint for what a second Trump administration would look like, which was written by people who worked in the first one and then went to work for the virulently homophobic and transphobic Heritage Foundation, wants to put the full strength of the federal government into this attack on the LGBTQ plus community. Project 2025 intends to remove sexual orientation and gender identity from non-discrimination policies within the government, to undermine the Supreme Court's Bostock decision, which I'll mention later, to eliminate transgender health care in Medicare and Medicaid, and in the anti-discrimination rules regarding gender identity in the Affordable Care Act, to expel transgender troops and people living with HIV, which is today a manageable health condition, from our military, to deny students the right to use their names or pronouns that don't match their birth certificate, and to allow teachers to refer to students intentionally and hostilely by the wrong name, and to remove all references and all discussion of LGBTQ people and our identities from our schools, a nationalized version of Florida's Don't Say Gay law. In the face of this sort of backlash, places like Alexandria need to stand up and push back. And that's what our city's been doing. We stood together with the school board against Youngkin's anti-trans policies that were brought forward in 2022. We've added sexual orientation, gender identity, and transgender status to our human rights ordinance. We've held a wonderful Pride celebration every year, including in Market Square the last 2 years. And we've worked closely with our LGBTQ+ task force, and members of whom are here tonight, to advance these goals, which has kept us a perfect score on the HRC Equality Index, which is appropriate because this is Alexandria. The French Quarter Cafe was in Alexandria, the bar that ended Virginia's ban on gay bars, opened right here at 808 King Street in 1991. In May, a group of residents and allies came to me and asked that the city do more. Some of them are in the audience tonight. Lyra McMillan, Nora Dick, Joe Rojas, Jennifer and Anne Marie are here. They asked that we take a proactive step to prepare ourselves to respond in the event that Virginia joins the ranks of states attacking the rights of its own residents, or if another state passes laws that attempt to impose their policies on people visiting Virginia, or if a new right-wing administration takes the assault on LGBTQ people national. They asked Alexandria join other cities around the nation, cities that share our liberal values, to do what we can within the limits of our power to ensure that Alexandria remains what it should be, a safe haven, a place of sanctuary and support for LGBTQ plus people. Dean Kime from the city's attorney's office, who's here this evening. Thank you very much, Dean. worked with me in response to the citizens and took feedback from members of the council to help draft the resolution that was attached to the docket. He did a great job. Our city attorney's office is amazing. Any residents who don't recognize the valuable work the city attorney's office does really need to take a look at the great product that they produce. And Dean and obviously our city attorney, Sharon, have been just wonderful throughout this process. The resolution is long, so I'm not going to read through it all. But if you do, and I hope you all have, you'll see what it establishes. The history of Alexandria's support for the LGBTQ plus community and our city's desire to protect all of its residents, the medical consensus on the value of gender-affirming care and the alarming scaling back of access to such care in the wake of anti-trans laws and threats of violence against medical professionals, the growing wave of anti-LGBTQ bills being filed across the country, the anti-LGBTQ policies like those being pushed by Governor Youngkin in 2022, and the alarming rise of violence against LGBTQ Americans, particularly trans people. And as a ray of hope, a series of court decisions that have pushed back against the tide, including the Grimm decision, which established that discrimination on the basis of gender identity was unconstitutional, and the Bostock decision, written by a conservative Supreme Court justice appointed by Donald Trump, that argued that ruled that it was illegal to discriminate against individuals on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Yet despite these court rulings, those who want to undermine equality, to put barriers around gender-affirming care, to blot out any acknowledgement of our existence in public spaces have persevered. And so we must persevere too. The actions this resolution calls for are to recommit to supporting LGBTQ people in opposition to discrimination against them, to instruct our city attorney to seek participation in litigation to protect the rights of LGBTQ Americans, and most importantly, to instruct the city manager to ensure that our city adopts the understanding of constitutional rights embodied in the Grimm and Bostock decisions as our own, and that we approach our compliance with any law passed at any level of government with an intent to protect those rights up to and including legal action. As the only openly gay member of the current council, and only the second openly gay member, openly gay, who knows, to ever serve on council, I can tell you that this is a fraught and frightening time. A decade of joy has given way to an era of dread. Our local LGBTQ plus community needs to know that our commitment to them doesn't stop at rainbows on streets, that we're going to put our values into our laws and in this resolution, and that LGBTQ people who are not fortunate enough to live in Alexandria need to know that there's a place here, there's a safe haven, someplace they can come to if things get too dire where they are. This resolution addresses those fears in a substantial and constitutional way within the powers we have as a city. Thank you again to the residents who brought this forward, to the city attorney's office for their work in drafting it, and my colleagues who have expressed interest in this and the feedback you gave to me on the draft that I presented to you. There might be some more discussion, I don't know, but I would like to move approval and adoption of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion by Councilman McPike, seconded by Councilwoman Gaskins. Further discussion on the resolution. Councilwoman Gaskins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember McPike, for bringing forth this important resolution. I also want to thank so many members in the audience who came, not just tonight, but I recognize many of you because you've come and approached each of us individually to share your story, to share stories about the discrimination you faced, to share about the times that you have not felt welcomed and supported and what you needed from your council. I also want to thank, we had a number of young people who have reached out over the past months talking about the fears that they have had going to school, or even talking to some of folks in their classrooms. And so making sure that they could see a city council take action and let them know that this is a city, not just where we want them here now, but where we want them to grow here forever. I think my colleague, we received a number of emails with people saying, well, why do you have to do this now? Like, why would you put this forward? And I think my colleague laid out a really good map and examples of just the increases we've seen in discrimination, the examples of violence and attacks that we have heard about, the Supreme Court decisions. So I won't replay those, but I think that I am proud to be a part of a council where we have your leadership and where we are taking action to make sure that we are affirming the dignity and the worth and the rights of everyone in our community. I know we have more work to do. There are other issues we need to address, but I just want to say thank you, and I'm proud to be your second on this resolution.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gaskins. Councilmember Bagley, then Vice Mayor Jackson.
Yes, thank you. And again, kudos to my colleague for putting in the work to draft the resolution, to work with staff, to listen to the community and reflect back their needs and their concerns. It's interesting because you sort of got ahead of, I think, something that I was really emphasized to me as I read the resolution and as I read the letters from the community. There was a lot of comments about like, why highlight this community? Why give special, acknowledgement? And one phrase that struck me that I wanted to just respond to was, this suggests that one segment of our population is more important than the rest. What I am, my vote tonight is reflecting that one segment of the population is more at risk than the rest. And that's why an affirmative statement is necessary. Simply to exist is more risky and places people in dangerous situations if you are a member of the LGBTQ community. So that's why I'm supportive of the resolution and so appreciative of the work you've done, and want to thank you and our members of our community for being here tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Bagley. Vice Mayor Jackson.
Thank you. And I too want to thank Councilman McPike for bringing this forward and all his hard work on it. And I did want to say something about the emails, all the emails. So we do have, we have quite a bit of citizens, residents here in the city that are very concerned that their voices aren't heard either. But I think Councilwoman Bagley just said it best, that we are trying to do something for the benefit of those that are at risk, just like we do for the youth that are at risk in our city. For others that may see something that needs just extra support. And I know as a former teacher myself, I know our governor was brought up in Councilman McPike's remarks. You see on the national stage right now, the vice presidential candidate, Waltz, and he was a former social studies teacher, but also a former football coach. But he was the one that the students in his school went to say, would you sponsor our club, the LGBTQ club? And that is so important, because from the emails that we've been seeing from the residents that really just don't agree with this resolution, you should look toward him to see why it is him that needed to promote this particular club and the students that needed his support the most, because it is generally those that can lift up those that need the support the most, and have others kind of emulate and see that, oh, I can relate to him, so I can support this other group that normally I'm just scared, I'm nervous, I have no idea how to relate to them. But he can, and maybe he can show me the way to relate. So I appreciate this resolution, because that's what it speaks to. It speaks to our city that should always be inclusive, usually is inclusive, but needs that extra support and communications to say, we can't say by law we're a sanctuary city for anyone, but that we are a city that that supports you in your decisions. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Jackson. Further comments? Hearing none, let me just thank Councilman McPike for his leadership in bringing this forward and working with the advocates from the community who have pushed for this statement and this action. I certainly agree with my colleagues. I think Alexandria, in the broad history of our city, has worked over time in an incremental fashion to open the door wider and ensure that we are an inclusive community for LGBTQ residents, and we have at each point attempted to push the envelope for inclusion. That is not something that you rest on your laurels on. That is something that motivates you in the future and must continue to do that. And so I think this is an important statement. It's also important actions that we're taking. And I thank Councilman McPike for his leadership in bringing this before the council. Hearing no further discussion, it is a roll call, Madam Clerk. Please call the roll.
Councilman McPike,
Aye.
Councilwoman Gaskins,
Aye.
Mayor Wilson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Jackson.
Aye.
Councilman Aguirre.
Aye.
Councilmember Bagley.
Aye.
Councilman Chapman.
Aye.
Okay, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, number 14.